I think it should be very clear to a lot of us, if not all of us, that the sunnah of the Prophet has been corrupted by our community because we don't practice these things anymore. من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah on the last day, let him speak good or be silent. Let him speak good or be silent. Say good things. We have a problem of like these critics that want to just everything everybody does, they will just jump on it. And one of the things, and I've tried, I've been a public figure for many, many years. I've really tried to avoid that my whole public career just because I thought that was sunnah, like to practice that. That was my understanding. Like you can talk about ideas. It's important if there's bad ideas out there, you should criticize ideas. But attacking people. Now, one of the things Imam al-Ghazali says in Kitab al-Ilm, which is the first book of the Ihya, which is the revivification or the revival of the Islamic sciences, he begins it with the book of knowledge because that's how Islamic sciences are revived. In that book, he says, he calls these people the foul scholars, ulama as-su. And he said the hallmark of foul scholars is they attack other scholars. He said that is their hallmark. And he said they always do it claiming that they're defending the religion. They're doing it out of righteousness. And يَذُبُّونَ عَنِ الْحَقِّ. They're defending the religion. But then he says, in reality, they're undermining the religion. He goes into the psychology behind it, and he says the actual reason why they're doing it is because they know that the quickest way to gain followers is by attacking others. And this is a psychology. And so one of the things that you will note is that some people, they're on, for instance, they have a channel or something online, and their normal talks will have very low viewing. So like a few hundred people. But then when they attack a scholar and they put the name of the scholar, why you shouldn't follow so-and-so or why so-and-so is misguided, they'll have thousands of people going onto it. So they know that it works. And that's what Imam al-Ghazali says. This is a strategy for gaining followers. And he says atba' in Kitab al-Ilm, which is now online, they call them followers, like how many followers you have. And followers means nothing. It doesn't mean you're guided because you have lots of followers. It could be quite the opposite. There's celebrities that have millions of followers. And then there's incredible scholars that like have a handful. Allah does that. That's not within our grasp. So it's important to note. And Imam al-Ghazali then says something very interesting. He says, and somebody might say that I don't know what I'm talking about. He said, no, take it from one who was the best of the bunch at doing that before Allah illuminated his inner eye and he made tawbah. And he's talking about himself because he was famous for that, for attacking other people. And he could win any argument. But he realized that he was misguided in doing it. And one of the things that Sheikh Uthaymin, who was one of the great scholars of Arabia, died not that long ago. But one of the things that he said was there are three reasons why scholars should not attack other scholars. The first reason is that when you attack other scholars, the people that support those scholars will never listen to you because they just don't like you for attacking the scholar that they like. So you lose credibility with a lot of people that you shouldn't lose credibility with. That's one reason. The second reason, he says, it undermines scholarship because if you're attacking scholars, instead of saying like, I think this position might be wrong or there might be a khilaf or something, instead of looking at, or like he says that you should actually contact them and ask them about why they've said something because maybe they didn't even say it. But the third thing he said is that it creates doubt in the common people. They lose their faith in scholars. And so it undermines the Sharia. So those are three reasons, but I think the best reason is because the Prophet ﷺ said that when Allah removes his providential care on people, the sign of it is that he preoccupies them with things that don't concern them. And that's another really important hadith because the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that Abu Huraira relates, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, min husni islam al-mar'i tarkuhu ma la ya'nihi. And this is a good hadith that Imam al-Tirmidhi relates, one of the 6 canonical books as the Sunan of Imam al-Tirmidhi. So this hadith says that from the beautiful Islam of a person is his leaving what doesn't concern him. In other words, minding his own business. And one of the hallmarks of what in English we call busybodies is people that concern themselves with things that aren't their concern. One of the scholars was walking by a beautiful house and he asked somebody whose house it was, and he told him, and the scholar said that he asked forgiveness for Allah for 40 days after that, because he said it was none of his business whose house it was. It was just istitla, like curiosity, which didn't just kill the cat, it very often will kill your heart. And so in this hadith, which Abu Dawud said is 1/4 of Islam, min husni islam al-mar'i tarku ma la ya'ni, 1/4 of Islam. In this hadith, Ibn Hajar al-Haytami, in his amazing commentary, he did a commentary on the 40 hadith of Imam an-Nawawi, which is, he put it in there. But Abu Dawud said this is 1/4 of Islam. Ibn Hajar said, al-Haytami, not al-Asqalani, he said, actually, this is half of Islam. Because half of Islam is fi'l and the other half is tark. Half of it is doing and the other half is not doing. So this is the half that deals with doing. And then he said, no, I'll even go further than that. I'll say this is all of Islam. It's not even a 1/4 or a half. It is all of Islam. Because if you're not preoccupied in what doesn't concern you, that means you're preoccupied in what concerns you. So I just want to really warn everybody, because there's a great statement of Imam al-Ghazali mentions Abu al-Qasim al-Hakim al-Samarqandi, who was one of the great scholars of Central Asia. He was from Samarkand. And he said all of the world's tribulations come from 3 things, all of them. He said the first is a naqilul akhbar. I would translate as a newscaster, somebody who's transmitting news. And then the second, he said, is mutalaqi al-akhbar, which is a consumer, a news consumer, somebody who's consuming news. And the third one, he said, is talib al-akhbar, a news hound. And he said none of them are free of blame. So all of the world's tribulations come from these 3 things. And so I want to just close this with something that from a great philosopher who over 200 years ago saw what was happening with the media. Because news, believe it or not, we've always had news, but newspapers and what we call modern media are actually relatively new things. And so this philosopher said that it says daily press, but I'm going to slightly change some of the wording to make it relevant for us today, because it was said over 200 years ago. He said that media is the evil principle of the modern world, and time will only serve to disclose this fact with greater and greater clarity. The capacity of the media for degeneration is sophistically without limit, since it can always seek lower and lower in its choice of consumers. At last, it will stir up all the dregs of humanity which no state or government can control. And then he said, suppose someone invented an instrument, a convenient little talking tube. I'm not making this up. Over 200 years ago, a talking tube, which say could be heard over the whole world. I wonder if the police would not forbid it, fearing that the whole country would become mentally deranged if it were used. On the whole, the evil in the media consists in its being calculated to make, if possible, the passing moment 1,000 or 10,000 times more inflated and important than it really is. But all moral elevation consists first and foremost in being weaned from the momentary. I mean, think about this. What does Allah say? عَمَّ يَتَسَاءَلُونَ. What are they asking about? عَنِ النَّبَإِ الْعَظِيمِ. On the vast news, the day of judgment. That's the real news, that we are going to be taken into account for our lives, for everything we do. And that's the real news. And once you realize that news, once that text message comes to you, if you really take it seriously, you'll start preparing and really think about it. So if you actually look at the name of our Prophet ﷺ, he is a Nabi. What is a Nabi? There's 2 ways of saying that, Nabiyun and Nabi'un, with Hamza or with the Ya. With the Hamza, it's from Naba'a, news. So the prophets are the news bringers. They bring the news. And the news is either glad tidings if you believe, or it's a warning if you don't believe. That's the real news. That's the news that we should be tuned into. It's not CNN. It's not MSNBC. It's not Fox News. It's divine news, because that's the real news. And then he says, and I'm going to substitute, because he was Christian, I'm going to substitute Islam for Christianity here. If Christianity is really to be proclaimed, I would say if Islam is really to be proclaimed, it will become apparent that the media, which will, if possible, make it impossible. There has never been a power so diametrically opposed to Islam as the media. Day in and day out, the media does nothing but delude the masses with the supreme axiom of this lie, that numbers are decisive. Islam, on the other hand, is based on the thought that the truth lies in the single individual. Because you're all going to be raised up as individuals. Each one of us is going to be called by our name and our mother's name. Every single one of us. We are not judged collectively. We're judged as individuals. And this whole collectivization that's happened in the modern era, where everybody talks about groups as if there's some real group out there called this people or that people. Where? Where are they? There's only individuals. That's all there is. And that's, in the end, how we're going to be raised up as individuals.